You ever get the feeling that some people hide behind religion, not because they're holy, but because it's the safest place to do something truly evil? Because that's exactly what happened in a small town called Hollow Creek. In 1989, a respected priest made a secret deal with something that should never have been invited into this world. He thought he could control it. He thought God would forgive him. But when a dying child was brought to his church and the priest tried to cheat the thing he'd made a pact with, the demon didn't just come for its offering, it came for him. And the way it took him is why the people of Hollow Creek still refuse to talk about that winter night. If you've ever wished that people who hide behind power, titles, or religion would finally face real justice, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notifications, because tonight's story isn't just about a demon, it's about desperation, betrayal, and a kind of twisted revenge that feels almost earned. Now, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, if you hear something whisper, "I'm hungry," don't answer. Let's begin. Hollow Creek was the kind of place you'd miss if you blinked at the wrong time on the highway. A single main street, 2 diners, a hardware store that also sold fishing gear and Bible-themed calendars, a gas station with 1 pump that always clicked twice before the numbers started, and, of course, the church. St. Bartholomew's Chapel sat at the edge of town like a watchful guardian made of brick and stained glass. The steeple pierced the sky, and on Sunday mornings the bells cut through the fog like a summons from heaven itself. People in Hollow Creek didn't question the church, they didn't question God, and they definitely didn't question Father Samuel Whitlock. He was the man everyone went to when life fell apart. He'd married most of the couples in town. He'd buried most of their parents. He'd blessed newborn babies, prayed over sick farmers, and held the hands of widows who couldn't stop shaking. He was steady, reliable, a calm face at hospital bedsides, a low voice in the confessional, sharing whispered absolutions. People said he had a gift. Old Mrs. Crawley claimed her lung condition got better after he prayed over her. A mechanic named Peter swore the priest's hand on his shoulder took away the pain he'd had for years. God works through him, they said. Nobody ever suspected that what worked through Father Samuel wasn't God at all. If the church was the heart of Hollow Creek, then the forest on the western side was its shadow. A dense wall of pines and oaks tangled together like something trying to hold back a secret. The trees there didn't sway like they did anywhere else. They leaned as if listening. Kids dared each other to go in after dark. Most didn't. Not because they were scared of animals, but because of the stories. Stories about clicking noises that followed you but never quite caught up. About voices that sounded like your own, whispering back your thoughts from somewhere deeper in the trees. And once in a while, a hunter or drunk teenager would swear they saw a shape moving between the trunks, too tall to be a person, too thin to be a bear. The adults dismissed all of it as small-town imagination, but even they locked their doors facing the woods. And when the wind blew just right, you could hear it all the way at the church, a strange, broken sound, like someone trying to speak through static. Hungry.
No one connected that sound to Father Samuel. Not yet. The mission in New Mexico. Years before Hollow Creek ever knew his name, Samuel Whitlock had been a young, idealistic missionary in New Mexico. He arrived at a remote village with a suitcase full of Bibles, a crucifix, and a burning desire to bring light. He also carried something heavier, a desperate hunger to feel important. He hated how small he felt back in seminary, overshadowed, overlooked. The professors praised other students for their sermons, their scholarship, their humility. Samuel was always promising, almost, not quite. In New Mexico, the village was suffering. Children were getting sick. One by one, they weakened without explanation. Doctors came, took blood, left with theories and no answers. The church sent a letter promising more funds soon, but soon doesn't mean anything when you're watching little bodies tremble through the night. Samuel tried everything. He prayed, he fasted, he stayed up all night reciting psalms, begging for a miracle. Nothing changed, and slowly a thought began to grow inside him. If God won't help, maybe something else will. There were whispers in the village, old stories, names that weren't supposed to be said out loud, something that lived beyond the hills, in the dark places between the rocks. He heard it in passing from an old woman with eyes like dried riverbeds. She looked at Samuel with a mix of pity and scorn. "Your God takes his time," she muttered. "There are other things that answer faster." It started with curiosity. Books, old texts, local legends written half in Spanish, half in something older. Samuel told himself he was studying so he could protect others. That's always how it begins, isn't it? The first night he attempted the ritual, he did it in secret, in a storage room behind the makeshift chapel. A single candle, chalk on the floor, symbols that felt wrong just to draw, like they were pressing back against his fingertips. He hesitated. Sweat slid down his spine. This is stupid. This is sin. This is... A child coughed in the next room, a small, wet, broken sound. Another one answered, and another. Their pain pierced through his hesitation like a hook. He bit his lip until he tasted blood, and then he began. He spoke the words exactly as he'd read them. The room dropped 5 degrees in an instant. The candle flame stretched sideways, reaching toward the far corner of the room, where it shouldn't have cast any light at all. The shadows there thickened, bubbled, gathered, and then a voice spoke, not out loud, but directly into his head, a chorus of whispers stacked together. Hungry. The air in his lungs turned to ice. What are you?" Samuel stammered. The shadows shifted. Something tall unfolded itself from the darkness. It had no eyes, no mouth, just a smooth, shifting void where a face should be. But Samuel felt it looking through him. "You called," it answered. "You read the old words. You asked for help." Samuel swallowed. "The children," his voice cracked. "They're dying. I can't watch. I can't just do nothing." The thing tilted its head, or the shadow that passed for one. Life for life, despair for power, fear for favor. Samuel shook his head. "I won't sacrifice anyone. I won't..." The shadows rippled. "Not sacrifice," it hissed softly. "I don't need their bodies. I don't even want their deaths. I want what spills out before the end." He didn't understand. The demon leaned closer, its form pressing down on his thoughts like a heavy, wet cloth. "Call me," it murmured, "when they are close to death. Let me watch, let me drink the fear that hangs in the air, the despair in their hearts, the surrender of their parents. In return, I will touch those you choose. I will pull them back." You can heal them?" Samuel whispered. "I can take them from the edge, not all, but enough to make you admired, praised, needed." That word hit him like a slap. Needed. It knew exactly where the wound in his soul was. Samuel closed his eyes. He thought of the children coughing, the tiny graves being dug outside the chapel. God had been silent. The shadows waited patiently. After a long moment, Samuel nodded. "I agree," he whispered. "A life for a life, fear for power, despair for favor." The demon's form expanded, filling the room with a suffocating darkness. "Then we have a pact." Over the next weeks, something strange happened. The children who were closest to death, the ones who'd stopped responding to medicine, the ones whose parents had already started picking funeral clothes, those were the ones Samuel prayed over most intensely. Those were the ones he called the demon for. He did everything the same on the outside: crucifix, holy water, whispered prayers. But inside his head, beneath the Latin, another name burned. When their parents' hope broke, when the air grew thick with grief, Samuel felt a chill spread across his skin. The demon was there, watching, drinking. And then the child would gasp. Their breathing would steady. Color would slowly creep back into their skin. "Another miracle!" the villagers cried. They hugged Samuel. They called him blessed, chosen. They never noticed that on those same nights, something else always happened. A stranger passing through the area would be found dead on the road. An old man living alone in a shack would simply not wake up. A traveler camping near the hills would be found with terror still frozen in his eyes. The demon kept its word. It gave life where Samuel pointed, and took life where it pleased. "A life for a life," it would whisper into Samuel's dreams. He told himself it wasn't his fault. He wasn't killing anyone. He was saving innocent children. God would understand, wouldn't he? When the sickness finally passed, Samuel was a hero. But heroes don't stay in forgotten villages forever. The church reassigned him to a quiet town in the Midwest called Hollow Creek. The demon followed. Samuel tried to be normal. He avoided the ritual. He ignored the whispers that scratched at the inside of his skull when he passed graveyards or hospitals. He threw himself into sermons, into community work, into the familiar rhythm of weddings and funerals. He even started to believe, for a while, that maybe the pact had faded. Until the first time someone in Hollow Creek came to him with a child and that particular kind of desperation in their eyes. An 8-year-old girl named Lily, heart condition. Doctors said they'd done all they could. Her father begged Samuel to pray over her. "I know you can help," he said, voice trembling. "I heard about you, your miracles." That word again, miracles. Samuel smiled gently, but his stomach twisted. That night he knelt by Lily's bed. Her skin was so pale he could see faint blue veins beneath. Her breathing came in tiny, shallow pulls. He placed his hand on her forehead. "Don't do it. Just pray. Just be a priest." The room grew cold. A familiar voice slithered around the edges of his thoughts. Hungry. Samuel squeezed his eyes shut. No, he whispered silently inside his chest. I'm not calling you. I'm not. But despair was thick in the air. The father sobbed quietly in the corner. The mother stared at her daughter with that hollow look of someone who'd been grieving for weeks before the death even came. Fear, despair. The demon didn't need words this time. The pact had already been made years ago. Shadows shifted in the corners of the room. Lily's chest hitched. Her next breath came just a little deeper, then a little more. Her cheeks flushed with a faint warmth. The father dropped to his knees. Thank you, Father Samuel, thank you. God bless you. Samuel's hand trembled. In the back of his mind, a low voice purred. A life for a life. The next morning, news came from the edge of town. A transient man, someone no one really knew, had been found dead in the ditch, his face locked in a silent scream. Samuel told himself it was coincidence. He had no proof otherwise, except for the gnawing sense of something smiling in the dark. By the winter of 1989, Emily Rhodes had lived in Hollow Creek for 4 years, but most days it felt like she was still a stranger. She was a single mother, and in a town like Hollow Creek, that was enough. They smiled at her, sure, but it was a thin, polite sort of smile, the kind that stays stuck to someone's face but never really reaches their eyes. She'd moved there after Noah's father left, disappearing one day with a "I'm not ready for this" at a slammed door, leaving behind a broken-down car, an overdue rent notice, and a baby with his eyes. Emily worked double shifts at the diner on Main Street. She served pie to the same men who whispered about her when they thought she couldn't hear. "Poor girl," Mrs. Crawley would say. "No ring, no husband? You know what that means." Emily would clench her jaw, smile tightly, and refill her coffee. She kept her head down. She didn't cause trouble. Noah was her whole world, bright, curious, always asking why the clouds moved faster on some days, why the moon followed their car home at night. He loved the forest, but Emily wouldn't let him go near it alone. "Bad things happen out there," she told him. "Like what?" he'd ask, eyes wide. She never had an answer that sounded silly, so she just said, "Promise me you'll stay close." He always did. For a while, life was hard but stable. They had routines, cheap cartoon cereal in the morning, school, after-school shifts at the diner, bedtime stories from thrift store books. Then, early that winter, Noah started getting tired. Not just "it's been a long day" tired, the kind of tired that sank into his bones. He'd come home from school, drop his backpack, and fall asleep sitting up on the couch. He couldn't finish his favorite stories, couldn't eat more than a few bites. At first, Emily thought it was the flu. Then she thought maybe anemia. She took him to the town clinic. The doctor frowned, poked, prodded, drew blood. The tests came back normal. "No infection, no fever," the doctor said, scratching his head. "His blood work looks like any healthy kid's." "Then why can't my son stay awake?" Emily demanded. "Why does he look like he's wasting away?" The doctor had no answer. So they went to the hospital in the neighboring city. More tests, more wires, more waiting. Again, nothing wrong. "It may be psychological," one specialist suggested gently. "Maybe stress." Emily almost laughed. Noah was 8. He cared about dinosaurs and toy cars, not mortgages and broken transmissions. But the more she pushed, the more their answer circled the same empty place. "Nothing medically wrong. Monitor at home. Let us know if it gets worse." It got worse. Noah started waking up at night gasping, not like he couldn't breathe, but like he'd been running in his sleep. He'd stare at the corners of his room and whisper, "Mom, do you see that?" "See what?" she'd ask, heart pounding. "The tall man." Noah's eyes would track something she couldn't see. "He stands in the corner. He's all wrong." Every hair on her body stood on end. "There's no one there, baby," she'd say, even as the room suddenly felt colder. "You're just dreaming." Noah would frown. "He says I'm not dreaming," he whispered once. "He says he's waiting." Those words lodged in her chest and stayed there, a splinter she couldn't stop touching with her thoughts.
Everyone in town knew about Noah's condition by then. They saw how Emily's uniform hung looser on her frame, how her eyes were ringed with purple, how her smile had turned into a stretched, brittle thing. They pitied her, but pity doesn't pay hospital bills. Finally, one of the older waitresses, Sue, leaned over during a slow shift and said, "Why don't you talk to Father Samuel?" Emily blinked. "The priest?" Sue nodded. "He's helped people before. Mrs. Crawley swears he prayed over her lungs, and she hasn't wheezed like she used to in years. The miller's boy recovered after the doctors gave up. Folks say he has a gift." Emily had never been a regular churchgoer. Her belief was a quiet, weary thing, less about miracles and more about, please just don't make things worse. But when hospitals and doctors and medicine all shrugged at her, she realized she was running out of options. That night, with Noah dozing fitfully on the living room couch, she grabbed her jacket. "Where are you going?" he murmured. "To talk to someone who might be able to help," she answered, kissing his forehead. "I'll be right back. You rest." The wind bit at her cheeks as she walked up the hill toward St. Bartholomew's. The church loomed against the winter sky, its stained glass windows dark. She hesitated at the door. What if this was stupid? What if the priest thought she was crazy? Then she remembered Noah whispering about the tall man in the corner of his room, about someone waiting. She pushed the door open. The interior was dimly lit by a few candles near the altar. The smell of old wood, wax, and something faintly metallic hung in the air. "Father Samuel?" she called softly. He emerged from a side door, wiping his hands on a cloth, his expression surprised but warm. "Emily," he said, "it's late. Is everything all right?" The question broke something in her. Words poured out of her in a rush. The hospital visits, the tests, the sleepless nights, Noah's visions, the terrible feeling that something was draining him from the inside out. He listened, really listened. His brow furrowed. His eyes kept flicking toward the back rooms, as if checking that they were still alone. When she finished, her voice cracked. "Please," she whispered, "I know I'm not the best Christian, okay? I don't come every Sunday. I don't have much to put in the collection plate. But he's my baby. If there's anything you can do." For a second, something flickered across his face. Guilt, fear, then a careful calm. "I want you to bring Noah here, tonight," he said quietly. "Tonight? But he's—" "Bring him after dark," Samuel repeated, softer now. "Some rituals are better performed when the day is done." She frowned. "Rituals?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Prayers," he corrected. "There are certain prayers for the gravely ill. They're not meant to be interrupted." Something about his tone made the skin on her arms prickle. "After dark," he said again. "Come to the side door. I'll be waiting." As she walked home through the biting wind, her mind churned. Every survival instinct told her that nothing good happened in a church after dark.
But what choice did she have? Noah's face flashed in her mind, sunken cheeks, dark eyes, little hand clutching hers in his sleep. If there was even a chance, she was going to take it.
At 9:45 p.m., the town was nearly silent. Most houses had dark windows, the only light a blue flicker from televisions. The gas station closed at 9 on weekdays. The forest on the western side was a jagged black mass against the sky. Emily wrapped Noah in his thickest coat, even though he barely seemed to register the cold anymore. He was heavy in her arms, not in the way of solid, youthful weight, but like something full of sand, slipping, sagging, surrendering to gravity. She carried him up the hill. Each step felt like it took a year off her life. The side door to St. Bartholomew's was unlocked, just as Samuel had said. She nudged it open with her shoulder. The hallway beyond was lit dimly by a single bulb. Shadows pooled in the corners like spilled ink. "Father?" she called. "Back here," his voice answered, muffled. She followed the sound to a door at the end of the corridor, one she'd never seen open before. Samuel stood there, holding it wide. His face was pale. His eyes were slightly too bright, like someone running on coffee and adrenaline. "Bring him in," he said. The room beyond was small, windowless, wooden walls, a desk, a simple chair. No cross, no holy pictures. Instead, 3 black candles had been placed carefully on the floor, forming a triangle around a single wooden chair. Her stomach flipped. What kind of prayer is this?" she asked, clutching Noah tighter. Samuel closed the door behind her with a quiet click. "It's old," he said. "Older than what we usually do here, but it's powerful. It's helped before when nothing else could." She swallowed hard. Everything in her body screamed, "Leave!" But Noah's head lolled against her shoulder, his lips parted in shallow breaths. "Put him in the chair," Samuel said gently, almost kindly. "Please." Slowly, with numb fingers, she obeyed. Noah's eyes fluttered open for a moment. "Mom?" he whispered hoarsely. "I'm here," she said, crouching in front of him. "I'm right here. We're just going to say some prayers, okay? Then you can sleep." He tried to smile. "Is the tall man coming?" he asked weakly. Emily's blood froze. "What tall man?" Samuel snapped a little too quickly. Noah's gaze drifted to the corner of the room where the shadows seemed thicker. "He's here," he murmured. "He's always here." Emily turned. There was nothing there, just darkness. Samuel's jaw tightened. He started lighting the black candles one by one. The flames sputtered, then flared too bright for a second. Emily felt the temperature in the room drop. Her breath fogged in front of her mouth. "Why is it so cold?" she whispered. Samuel didn't answer. He began to chant. The words he spoke weren't English. They weren't Latin either, not the Latin Emily vaguely recognized from rare holiday masses. They were wrong, guttural, thick. Each syllable sounded like it had been dragged over stones before leaving his throat. As he chanted, the candle flames flickered side to side, as if something invisible was circling them. Emily's heart pounded. She reached for Noah's hand. It was like ice. "Father Samuel," she said shakily, "are you sure this is—" "Don't interrupt," he hissed, eyes closed. His voice grew louder. The temperature dropped further. Emily's fingertips stung from the cold. Her teeth started to chatter.
Somewhere in the room, just beneath the sound of Samuel's chanting, something else began to whisper. At first, she thought it was the wind, but there were no windows. The sound gathered in the far corner of the room, the same one Noah had stared at. A scrape, like long nails dragging slowly along stone. Emily's breath hitched. "Father Samuel," she whispered, "something's in here." He kept chanting, faster now, a frantic edge creeping into his tone. The shadows in the corner began to move. They thickened, piling onto each other like smoke that didn't know how to rise. They climbed the wall, stretching, unfolding. Noah whimpered. "Mom," he whispered, "he's coming." Emily turned fully toward the corner and saw it. The darkness peeled itself off the wall like wet paper. It rose, too tall, too thin, limbs too long, joints bending at slightly wrong angles, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. Its fingers were narrow shadows that tapered to fine, sharpened points. Where a face should be, there was only a shifting black void. Not just darkness, an absence, a hole punched in the world. But when it turned toward Emily, she felt the impact like a physical blow. Her knees trembled. It didn't have eyes, but something in that featureless void pinned her in place. Layers of voices spilled from it when it spoke. Men, women, children, all overlapped, all warped. Hungry. The sound slithered through her bones. She stepped in front of Noah's chair instinctively, her body moving before her mind did. One hand braced on the wooden armrest, the other lifted as if she could physically block whatever that was. The thing tilted its head. "Fear, despair, yes, I smell it." Behind her, Samuel's chanting faltered. "Enough," he gasped. "You know why I called you." The demon's head turned toward him. "You called," it agreed. "Too late." Samuel's face blanched. "What?" he whispered. "The boy should have been offered at the turning of the first snow, at the edge of death, at the peak of despair. That was our agreement. I needed more time. His mother, the town, they needed faith. They weren't ready. I wasn't." "You delayed. You hoarded my favor. You used my power, my hunger, and then refused to feed me." Its limbs elongated, stretching across the room in a heartbeat. Emily screamed and stumbled back as one of the shadow arms shot past her, stopping inches from Samuel's chest. "You broke the pact, Samuel," it hissed.
Emily's mind scrambled for sense. Offered? Agreement? Pact? She turned to Samuel, her voice shrill with terror and betrayal. "What is it talking about?" she demanded. "Offered? You were going to—" Samuel's eyes were wild. "I never meant—" He swallowed, then snapped at the demon. "I brought the boy, didn't I? He's dying. Take his fear. Take whatever you need from him. Just spare me." Emily's stomach dropped. She felt like the floor had been ripped out from under her. You what?" she choked. "You were going to let that thing use my son just to save yourself?" "It wouldn't have killed him," Samuel shouted desperately, eyes darting between them. "It doesn't always kill them. It pulls them back. I've saved so many." "At what cost?" Emily screamed. "Whose life, whose father, whose son died so you could play the hero?" The demon laughed. It was a horrible, broken sound, like a child trying to imitate an adult's chuckle, but getting all the notes wrong. "He knows," it purred. "He felt every death.
He heard every scream in his dreams, the lonely man in the hills, the wanderers on the road, the ones no one would miss. Samuel squeezed his eyes shut, as if the memories physically hurt. "I did what I had to do," he whispered. "I saved children. I saved families. God abandoned them. I stepped in." "You did nothing," the demon corrected. "I gave life. You pointed. You watched. You enjoyed their gratitude." Emily stared at him, shaking. All the times people in town had said, "Father Samuel is a miracle worker." All the times he'd looked so humble. It had all been built on something rotten. "You're a monster," she whispered. His head snapped toward her, face twisting. "I did this for them," he hissed. "For this town, for people like you who come crawling, begging for miracles." The demon's arm twitched. "You speak too much," it murmured. The shadow that had been hovering in front of Samuel darted forward. It wrapped around him like smoke, like tar, like the night itself had decided to become solid. Samuel screamed, not a wholly dignified sound, a raw, hysterical animal noise. The demon lifted him off the floor without effort, his body contorted, his bones bending where they shouldn't bend, his spine arcing at unnatural angles. Emily grabbed Noah's chair and dragged it toward the wall, away from the thrashing form of the priest. She wanted to look away. She couldn't. Samuel's fingers clawed at the air, reaching toward her. "Help me," he choked. "In God's name!" "Don't you dare use his name now," Emily spat, tears streaming down her face. "You did this. You brought that thing here." The demon's voice rolled through the room like distant thunder. "God was not in our agreement," it said. "You wanted power. You wanted worship. You wanted to be the hand of miracles. Now you will be the offering." Samuel's jaw snapped open, too wide. The sound cut off. His body sagged as the shadows tightened, pressed, seeped into his skin. For a second he ballooned, stretched, as if something inside him was trying to claw its way out through every pore. Then, with a sickening wet crack, everything stopped. The demon let go. What fell to the floor was wrong. His body looked intact at first glance, but then Emily saw his limbs lay at odd angles, joints slightly misaligned. His chest had caved in just a touch too much. His eyes stared at nothing, the pupils blown wide in frozen terror. He looked like someone had pulled everything out from him, not just organs, but essence, and left the skin behind as an afterthought. The candles went out in the same instant. Total darkness swallowed the room. Emily's breath came in short, sharp bursts. She fumbled for Noah, hands shaking, fingers brushing over his small arm, his face, his hair. "Mom?" he whispered faintly. I'm here, baby, A soft glow began to spread from the floor. The black candles relit themselves, flames small but steady. In their dim light, the demon turned, slowly, deliberately. Its void face settled on Emily. She froze. Her body screamed, "Run," but her legs wouldn't move. It took a step toward her. The air thickened around her lungs. "You reek of fear, of love, of desperation. A mother's despair is rich." She started to shake. "If you touch him," she said, voice barely more than a breath, "I will fight you until my heart stops. I don't care what you are." The demon's head tilted. "You stand between me and the offering." "No," she whispered. "I'm standing between you and my son."
For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Noah stirred. He sucked in a breath, a deep, full breath, the kind he hadn't managed in weeks. His eyes fluttered open. They were clearer, brighter. He looked from his mother to the demon, gaze steady in a way that made him seem older than 8. "Are you the tall man?" he asked quietly. Emily gripped his shoulders. "Noah, don't talk to—" "I am," the demon answered, turning slightly toward him. "Are you here for me?" Noah asked. The demon paused. "I was," it admitted. "You were promised your fear, your despair. You were to be the feast that sealed our latest exchange." "And now?" Noah asked. His voice didn't shake. Emily realized her son wasn't crying. He should be screaming, hiding, begging. Instead, he looked tired. Not in the sick, drained way he'd looked for weeks, in the way of someone who'd been living with terror for so long that the spike of it had dulled into a low, constant ache. "You've been in my room," he said, "for a long time, watching me." "Yes," the demon said simply. "Why didn't you just take me?" Noah asked. "The pact," the demon replied. "I could not claim what was promised until the priest invited me fully, until he kept his part. He did not. He delayed." Noah glanced at Samuel's twisted body on the floor. "Does it hurt?" he asked softly. "He is past hurt," the demon said. Emily's throat closed. "Noah, look at me," she begged. "Please, don't listen to it." He turned to her. His small hand came up, clumsy but determined, and pressed against her cheek. "Mom," he whispered, "you've been crying for weeks." Her breath hitched. "You think I don't hear you," he continued, eyes glistening, "praying in the kitchen, asking God why he won't help, asking what you did wrong. You think I don't hear you say you'd give anything to make me better." Her knees weakened. She sank onto the floor in front of him, grasping his hands. "I didn't mean it like this," she choked. "Not like this." The demon watched. "A life for a life," it said again. "That is the rule, the balance. I do not break it." Emily's head snapped up. "You took him," she said, pointing at Samuel, her finger shaking. "Is that enough? Is my son free now?" The demon seemed to consider. "The priest," it murmured. "He was the one who summoned, the one who bound, the one who called again and again. His life pays for the broken pact, for the delay, for the times I was cheated of my full feast." It turned toward Noah. But the boy's life was promised as part of that pact, separate, an offering yet unclaimed. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not fair." "Fair?" the demon repeated, tasting the word. "You speak of fair? Many died so others could live. Their fear fed me. Their deaths strengthened my touch. Was that fair?" She had no answer. "Fair," it continued, "is balance. I do not choose who lives or dies. You mortals do. I simply take what was agreed upon." "So, what now?" Noah asked. Emily could barely breathe, her heart hammering in her ears. "Please," she begged, "take me instead. I'm the one who brought him here tonight. I'm the one who agreed to this ritual. If a life has to pay for whatever this is, take mine, but leave him." The demon seemed to loom larger, though it hadn't moved. For a moment, there was only the sound of the candles flickering. Then, "You would give your life for his?" it asked. "Yes," she said instantly, without thinking, without regret. Noah sobbed, finally breaking. "Mom, no!" She cupped his face. "Hey,
she whispered. "Listen to me. You're 8. You haven't had a chance to do anything yet. You're supposed to go to school and complain about homework and fall in love and hate your job and live. That's what you're supposed to do, okay? Me? I've had my chances. I messed some up. I did my best in others. But if this is the cost, you can't," he cried. "You can't leave me alone. I'd rather leave you alive and sad than gone and at peace, baby. That's what mothers do. We break." The demon watched them. Something shifted in the air, not softer, but more focused. Interesting. Very interesting.
The pact with Samuel required a life for life, the demon said slowly. He took many lives through me. He fed me much fear and despair. In return, I granted him power, fame, worship. Its form seemed to ripple, as if considering something deeply. Tonight, he tried to cheat. He delayed. He offered less than promised. For that, his life is forfeit. That debt is paid. Emily clung to Noah, afraid to hope. The boy's life, however, the demon continued, was written into the debt as an additional offering, one final feast, not necessary for balance, but for indulgence. In other words, Emily snapped despite her terror, "You're just greedy." Silence. Then, to her shock, the demon laughed again. "Yes," it admitted, "I am hunger, and hunger is rarely modest." "Then why are we still talking?" Emily demanded. "If you're going to take him, do it. Don't drag it out. Don't pretend you're something other than what you are." Her voice shook, but she held its void gaze. Anger burned through her fear, hot and bright, because beneath the terror was rage. Rage at Samuel, rage at every person who'd whispered about her but never helped. Rage at a God who'd stayed silent while something else crawled into her child's room at night and watched him suffer. The demon tilted its head again, studying her. "You hate him," it said quietly, nodding toward Samuel's corpse, "more than you hate me." "Yes," she spat, "because you never pretended to be good. He did." It was the closest thing to a moral the demon had heard in years. "A life for a life," it repeated for the 3rd time. "The priest's life for the boys. The pact is satisfied." The air in the room shifted. Her ears popped, like when an airplane changes altitude. Emily's arms tingled. She realized with a jolt that she could feel Noah's heartbeat against her chest, strong, steady, not weak and fluttering like before. He drew in another deep breath and exhaled slowly. "What are you saying?" she whispered. The demon's form began to blur at the edges. "He lives," it said simply. "The debt is paid. The pact is kept." She stared, unable to process it. "That's it?" she choked. "You're just leaving?" "Do you wish me to stay?" it asked, almost curious. "No!" she shouted immediately. "Then yes," it said. "I leave. I have other hungers, other callers. Mortals are never satisfied with what is given to them. There will always be more pacts." Noah clung to her. "Will I still see you?" he asked quietly. The demon paused. "If you stand near this chapel after midnight and call with enough fear in your heart, I will hear you. Whether I answer is another question." Its limbs began to dissolve, breaking apart into smaller shadows that seeped back into the corners, under the door, into the cracks between the floorboards. "Remember," it whispered one last time, "good and evil are stories you tell yourselves. Balance is all that matters." And then it was gone. The candles extinguished themselves. The room was plunged into darkness. For a long time, the only sound was Emily's ragged breathing and Noah's quiet sobs.
When Emily finally managed to stand, her legs were stiff. She found the door handle by feel, fumbled with the lock, and staggered out into the hallway with Noah leaning against her. The church was silent. The world outside the stained glass windows was still dark, but a faint pale line at the horizon hinted that dawn wasn't far off. She didn't know how long they'd been in that room. She didn't care. All she cared about was that Noah walked beside her. Walked. He wasn't being carried. He wasn't trembling with exhaustion. He was there. "Mom," he whispered as they passed the main sanctuary, "are we going to tell people?" She hesitated. The answer formed instantly in her gut, as natural as breathing. "No," she said, "we're not." "Why?" She looked down at him. Because no one would believe them. Because they'd call her hysterical, unhinged. Because they'd look at Noah like he was cursed, like he'd brought something with him. Because some truths don't save anyone. They just burn what's left. "Because it's over," she said instead, "and we're not inviting it back in by talking about it." Noah nodded slowly. They exited through the side door. The air outside felt almost too warm after the biting chill of the ritual room. She looked up at the sky. No thunder, no apocalyptic sign, just early morning gray. For one insane moment, she wondered if she'd imagined it all. Then she thought of Samuel's twisted body on the floor. No, it happened. It all happened. Later that morning, when the church caretaker arrived, he found Father Samuel lying in the hallway. He didn't see the ritual room's contents. The wax from the black candles had already vanished, as if they'd never burned. Doctors were called. They said Samuel had died of sudden internal collapse, a vague term for a body that looked intact on the outside, but wrong on the inside. They said maybe it was an aneurysm, maybe a freak cardiac event. No one had a real answer. The town mourned. They called him a devoted servant of God and a man who gave everything for his flock. Emily stood at the back of the funeral, fingers digging crescents into her palms. She didn't speak, didn't contradict. Noah stood beside her, alive, color in his cheeks. That was all that mattered. Time smoothed over the horror. On the surface, anyway. The church closed for a while out of respect and to undergo renovations. Some said it was because no one wanted to take Father Samuel's place. Others whispered that the late priest's personal chambers had always given them a bad feeling, and maybe it was best to leave the building alone for a bit. Eventually, a new priest came, younger, eager, unaware of what had seeped into the stones years before he arrived. He opened the church again. People filed in tentatively at first, then more confidently. Life went on. Noah recovered completely. Doctors, when they finally examined him again, shrugged. Sometimes the body just corrects itself, they said. Spontaneous remission.
Emily smiled politely and thanked them. She did not correct them. Noah grew. He went back to school. Teachers remarked on how quiet he'd become. He wasn't shy, just watchful. Sometimes, when the class fielded a question about God or miracles, other kids would give the standard answers they'd learned in Sunday school. Noah would stare out the window toward the distant shape of the church steeple and say nothing. At night, he slept deeply. No more gasping awakenings, no more staring at corners. But he never liked sleeping with his door fully closed again, not even as a teenager. He always left it cracked open, just enough to see a sliver of the hallway light. On the rare nights when wind howled past their little house, making strange noises around the eaves, Emily's mind would flash back to the whisper, "Hungry." She'd lie awake and listen, but nothing else ever came.
Years passed. Kids in Hollow Creek grew up on the usual mix of small-town legends. A ghostly hitchhiker on the highway, a phantom train whistle on windless nights. But there was one story almost everyone knew, told in hushed tones, usually after midnight, usually by someone who claimed it had happened to a friend of a cousin. They said that if you went up to St. Bartholomew's after midnight and stood close to the old chapel wall facing the forest, you might hear something. Not the wind, not an animal, a voice, thin, broken, layered like many voices speaking as one, whispering from somewhere deep inside the darkness of the church. "I'm hungry." Most dismissed it as creaking pipes or old foundations. Teenagers used the story as an excuse to dare each other to sneak onto the church grounds after parties. Most of them came back laughing, insisting they'd heard nothing but their own footsteps. Some, though, came back paler, quieter, not because they'd seen the demon, not because something had spoken to them directly, because standing that close to the stained glass in the dead of night, with the world so utterly still, they'd felt something, like eyes, watching. A few swore they'd seen a shadow move behind the colored panes, tall, thin, too large to be a person. The adults told them to stop making things up. The new priest insisted the church was just a building, nothing more. Emily stayed away from the hill as much as she could, but sometimes late at night, when worry or grief for everyday things kept her awake, unpaid bills, a fight with Noah during his teenage years, a call from a collection agency, she'd find herself walking. Not all the way up, just far enough to see the faint outline of the steeple against the sky. She'd stand there, breath clouding in front of her, and whisper, "Thank you." She didn't know who she was thanking. God, the demon, herself. Maybe all three. Because here's the thing. Father Samuel was never exposed. Not publicly. No one dug into his past in New Mexico. No one traced unexplained deaths in other towns to his miracles. On paper, he died a faithful servant. His portrait hangs in the church hallway to this day, eyes smiling benignly at anyone who passes. But Emily knows, Noah knows, and something else knows too. That thing in the shadows. Whatever name you want to give it, demon, spirit, ancient hunger, it did something that night that God never did. It answered. It punished the man who hid his selfishness behind holy robes. It took back the power from someone who had used it to manipulate faith,
to build a house of worship on graves no one mourned. It enforced balance, twisted, terrifying, but real. Was that justice, or just horror with good timing? Maybe both, because think about it. A man who traded strangers' lives for applause, a mother who would trade her own life for her child without hesitation. One of them walked into that ritual room thinking he was in control. Only one of them walked out. If that doesn't feel like some kind of cosmic payback to you, maybe you haven't been betrayed badly enough yet.
To this day, if you visit Hollow Creek, most people won't talk about 1989. Ask them about Father Samuel, and they'll say, "Oh, he was a good man. Died too young. Heart gave out, poor thing." If you're persistent, if you catch someone at the bar after a few drinks, they might say, "There was something strange about how he died. Body looked off, but I'm no doctor." And if you find a certain house near the edge of town, if you happen to speak to an older woman with tired eyes and a son who visits every Sunday, she'll tell you nothing. She'll shake her head and change the subject, because she knows that some stories are invitations, some stories are doors, and this one has a hungry thing on the other side. So if you ever find yourself passing through a small Midwest town with a forest on the western side and a church on the hill, and if for whatever reason you decide to take a walk after midnight, you might hear it. At first, just a soft scraping sound, like long fingers brushing against stone. Then, beneath the chill wind, a whisper, layered, wrong, yet somehow almost amused. "I'm hungry." If you do, don't be brave, don't be curious, walk away, because the only reason that thing isn't still feeding on Hollow Creek is that long ago a priest tried to cheat it, and a mother loved her son more than her own life. The pact was kept, the balance restored, and now it's just waiting for the next person who thinks they can bargain with their soul and come out ahead. You know, people like to believe that evil always looks like a monster, something with claws and teeth and glowing eyes. But in Hollow Creek, the most dangerous evil wore a collar, held a Bible, and smiled while everyone thanked him. The demon didn't create that, it just collected on a debt. Maybe that's the scariest part. Not that something hungry is out there in the dark, but that sometimes the only thing that punishes our monsters is something even worse. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. I've got plenty more tales waiting in the dark. Tell me in the comments, would you have taken your child into that church after dark? And do you think what happened to Father Samuel was justice or just horror? Sleep well tonight, and if you hear a voice in the corner of your room whisper, "I'm hungry," don't answer. I'll see you in the next story.